House prices are rising, many young people are struggling to get on the property ladder, and calls for action are growing across Europe. So, what is the EU going to do about it? Well, like many things in the bloc, it's not quite so straightforward. Let me explain. It's clear that many EU countries have a housing problem. Since 2010, house prices have ramped up by 55.4% across the EU, according to the latest Eurostat data. Prices in Lithuania, Latvia, Czechia, Portugal, Bulgaria, Austria and Luxembourg more than doubled in that time. And for Hungary and Estonia, they rose by over 200%. Only Italy saw prices decrease, and that was by 4%. In the same period, wages have struggled to keep up with increased costs. More people are forced to rent in a market that is also increasingly expensive and competitive. As two European Policy Centre experts put it in an op-ed, today housing works as a regressive tax on the young and poor who are paying older, wealthier property owners for a place to live. With building costs climbing, mortgage rates rising and construction slowing down, there's less new housing coming onto the market. At the same time, more homes are being bought for short-term rentals or as investments, and that's driving prices up, especially in cities. But the EU doesn't actually have control over housing directly. This means it can't make laws or decisions about things like home prices, building rules, or housing policies in each country. Those decisions are up to the member states themselves. With that being said, there is increasing political pressure for it to do more.
I think what we should be very aware of in Europe at the moment, that indeed the lack of affordable housing is really a threat to democracy. So I think we see it at a very individual level. If we don't have access to affordable housing, that obviously compromises our capacity to take part in society, whether that is taking part in education, in training, in employment. We see also a huge hidden social cost, the most extreme of that being obviously homelessness, where there are 1.2 million people living homeless at any given night in Europe.
Some European politicians and activists point to immigration as a key driver of the housing crisis, but the real picture is not so clear-cut.
So when it comes to immigration impact on the housing crisis, obviously any increase in demand is going to put further pressure on the capacity to deliver. However, we do see that the deeper structural failings and the lack of investment in the sector, the rents that have skyrocketed in many parts of Europe are, let's say, more of an issue. And very often the immigration question is in a way a scapegoat for the more generalised structural issues that we have to face up to.
The EU has recognised the problem, and it's beginning to take action.
If we fail to act, we risk further deepening economic disparities and undermining the very cohesion of our union, because everyone deserves a place to call home.
Let's work together to deliver affordable, sustainable, and decent housing for our citizens.
At the end of last year, Ursula von der Leyen appointed Dan Jorgensen, who you just saw on screen, as the first ever Commissioner for Housing, and a special committee on the housing crisis has been set up. It's not the first time the EU has made moves in this area. In 2021, the EU pledged to end homelessness by 2030. It's an ambitious goal, and there are still 5 years left, but Fianza, a leading homelessness NGO, says that the numbers are currently increasing. The organisation does acknowledge that the issue seems to be gradually gaining political legitimacy at the EU level though, which it says is cause for hope. And Housing Europe also sees ways forward when it comes to the housing crisis.
I think many of the housing solutions are there. We see whether that is in individual schemes of public housing that works in a very efficient way, municipal housing, cooperative housing, limited profit housing. We see excellent examples. So if we can work on things like freeing up investment from EU level, giving the right instruments to tackle, for instance, the impact of short-term lets on long-term lets, So ensuring from EU level that there is an obligation for transparency around data, and ensuring that cities and member states have the freedom to act on reducing short-term lets in areas where that is needed. That can be crucial. So I think we have to be figuring out, okay, what can the added value be? I think where we could go wrong is if we are not building on the best practice and trying to invent a made in Brussels approach.
Housing Europe also wants the EU to promote public, cooperative and social housing, as well as a review on the impact of current and future EU legislation, for example, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, to make sure they are aligned with the need to tackle the housing crisis. The EU can guide and influence, but it can't compel member states to act in this area. National, regional and local governments have to be behind the change. There is also not a one-size-fits-all solution for member states. Each country has different systems and cultures around housing that will impact what could be done. The new Commission is just getting going, so how much of an impact the EU can have over housing will be clearer in years to come. It's expected to publish the European Affordable Housing Plan in early 2026, which will set out further actions on housing. Meanwhile, millions of EU citizens will continue to grapple with this crisis. Follow the European Newsroom for more.